Imagine it's 1946. You're a factory worker in Cleveland, Ohio. You survived the Depression, you fought in the war, and now finally you're building the life you were promised. You have a steady job at Republic Steel. You have a small house with a 30-year mortgage. And every month, without fail, you walk into First National Bank and deposit $25 into a savings account. You do this because your father told you something that lodged in your brain during the hungry years of 1933. Cash is king, savings are safety, a man with money in the bank cannot be broken. So you save. You accumulate. By 1965, you have $32,000 sitting in that account. You feel proud. You feel secure. You did everything right. And you have no idea that you've already lost. Not through a crash. Not through a scam. Not through bad luck. You lost because the system was designed to take from you slowly, so slowly that you'd never notice until it was already gone. By the time you retire in 1972, your $32,000 buys what $14,000 would have bought when you started saving. And the forces that ate the rest weren't accidental. They were policy. This is the story of how savings are destroyed, not through misfortune, through mathematics. Here is the uncomfortable truth that this script will document. Your savings account is not a wealth preservation tool. It is a wealth transfer mechanism from you to the state and from the future to the present. This is not theory. It is documented monetary history spanning 3,000 years and every major economy on Earth. The belief that saving money preserves purchasing power is one of the most persistent illusions in modern financial life. It survives because it was true once for a very short window of human history, and because the mechanisms that destroy savings operate below the threshold of human perception. Inflation at 3% per year does not feel like theft. It feels like nothing. It is invisible at the daily level, devastating at the generational level. Once you understand how this works, you will see the same pattern in ancient Rome, in revolutionary France, in interwar Germany, in post-war Britain, in modern Argentina, and in the economy you are living in right now. This isn't about pessimism. It's about pattern recognition. And the pattern is always the same. Ask anyone on the street what a savings account is for. They will tell you it's where you put money to keep it safe. They'll tell you it earns interest. They'll tell you it's the responsible thing to do. They'll tell you that rich people invest, but regular people save, and that saving is how regular people get ahead. This belief is so deeply embedded in Western culture that questioning it feels almost immoral. We teach children to save. We praise thrift. We tell stories of grandparents who scrimped and saved and built something. And every word of it rests on an assumption that has been false for most of modern history. The assumption is this, that the unit of account, the dollar, the pound, the euro, holds its value over time. That a dollar saved today will purchase roughly a dollar's worth of goods in 20 or 30 years. This assumption is catastrophically incorrect. And the people who design monetary systems know it. Let me show you the evidence. In 1971, a first-class postage stamp in the United States cost 8 cents. Today, it costs 68 cents. In 1971, the median home price was $24,000. Today, it is over $400,000. In 1971, a gallon of gasoline cost 36 cents. Today, it hovers around $3.50. Now, most people understand that prices go up. That's inflation, they say. It's normal. It's natural. It's the cost of a growing economy. But that framing is a distortion. Prices are not going up. The value of money is going down. These are two very different things, and the difference matters. When you hear that prices rose 5% last year, what actually happened is this. The purchasing power of every dollar in every savings account, pension fund, and paycheck declined by 5%. The number on your bank statement stayed the same. The goods it could buy shrank. This is not a bug, this is a feature. Central banks in every major economy explicitly target inflation rates of 2 to 3% per year. This is stated policy. The Federal Reserve publishes it. The European Central Bank publishes it. The Bank of England publishes it. And when you run the mathematics on a 2% annual inflation target over a typical working life, say 45 years, you discover something disturbing. At 2% annual inflation, a dollar today will be worth 41 cents in 45 years. At 3%, it will be worth 26 cents. At 4%, which has been common in many decades, it will be worth 17 cents. Let that sink in. If you save money for your entire working life in an account earning 1% interest while inflation runs at 3%, you are losing 2% of your purchasing power every single year. Compounded over 4 decades, you don't have savings. You have a receipt for wealth that was transferred elsewhere. This is what is actually happening, and it is not new. The mechanism behind this has a name. Economists call it financial repression. Financial repression is a set of policies that allow governments to borrow at interest rates below the rate of inflation, effectively transferring wealth from savers to borrowers. Since governments are the largest borrowers in every modern economy, this transfer flows primarily from citizens to the state. This is not conspiracy. This is published research from the International Monetary Fund. and the Bank for International Settlements. Here is how it works. Governments accumulate debt. Wars are expensive, social programs are expensive, infrastructure is expensive, and crucially, paying for these things through direct taxation is politically dangerous. Voters rebel, governments fall, so instead, states borrow. But debt must eventually be serviced. Interest payments consume an ever larger share of the budget, and at some point, the mathematics become inescapable. The debt cannot be repaid in real terms, not through growth, not through taxes, not through any politically viable means. This is where financial repression enters. If a government owes 100 trillion units of currency and cannot raise taxes high enough to repay it, it has two options. Option 1, default. Announce that the debt will not be repaid. This destroys the banking system, collapses the bond market, and typically triggers a catastrophic depression. No government chooses this unless forced. Option 2, inflate. Expand the money supply so that the 100 trillion units owed become worth less in real terms. Pay back the debt with depreciated currency. Transfer the cost to anyone holding that currency, especially savers. Option 2 is chosen every time. This is not theoretical. This is how the United States reduced its debt to GDP ratio after World War II. This is how Britain did the same. This is what is happening right now. Let me show you the receipts. In 1946, the United States federal debt stood at 119% of GDP, higher than at any point before or since, until very recently. The government owed more than the entire economy produced in a year. By 1980, that ratio had fallen to 32% of GDP. How did this happen? Did the government run massive budget surpluses? Did it slash spending and raise taxes? No. Between 1945 and 1980, inflation in the United States averaged 4.2% per year. Meanwhile, interest rates on government bonds were capped through regulatory controls, a form of direct financial repression. The real return on government bonds was negative for most of this period. What this means is simple. People who bought government bonds or held cash were guaranteed to lose purchasing power, and the government used that loss to pay down its debt. The United Kingdom did exactly the same thing. After World War II, British debt reached 250% of GDP. By 1991, it was 28%. How? Not through growth. The British economy underperformed its peers for most of this period, not through austerity. Public spending remained high. The debt was inflated away. And who paid? Every British citizen who held cash or fixed income investments, every pensioner living on a steady income, every worker whose wages lagged behind prices. This is documented history. Carmen Reinhardt and M. Belen Sprancia published a comprehensive study on this in 2011 through the National Bureau of Economic Research. It's titled, The Liquidation of Government Debt. You can read it yourself. Their conclusion is blunt. Financial repression was the dominant method of debt reduction in the post-war era, and it was achieved by systematically expropriating the purchasing power of savers. Think about what that means. Every public service announcement telling people to save, every financial literacy campaign encouraging thrift, every government bond marketed as a safe investment, all of it was running simultaneous with a policy designed to erode the value of those very savings. And this is not ancient history. This is the 20th century. And the 21st century is following the same pattern. But let's go further back, because this pattern didn't start with World War II. It is endemic to any system where the state controls the money supply. In 64 AD, the Roman Emperor Nero reduced the silver content of the denarius from 94% to 90%. A small debasement, barely noticeable. By the reign of Gallienus in 268 AD, the denarius contained less than 5% silver. It had become a bronze coin with a silver wash. The mechanism was the same as modern inflation. Expand the money supply by reducing its intrinsic value. Use the expanded supply to fund government expenditure. Let the population absorb the cost through higher prices. The result was also the same. People stopped trusting the currency. Commerce declined. Barter returned. The economy fragmented. In revolutionary France, the government issued assignats, paper currency backed by confiscated church lands. Between 1790 and 1796, the supply of assignats increased 40-fold. Their value collapsed by 99%. Anyone who held savings in assignats was destroyed. In Weimar Germany, the paper mark went from 4.2 to the dollar in 1914 to 4.2 trillion to the dollar in November 1923. A lifetime of savings could not buy a loaf of bread. In Zimbabwe, the inflation rate hit 79.6 billion% per month in November 2008. That is not a typo. Billion% per month. In Venezuela, inflation exceeded 1 million% in 2018. A bolivar saved in 2012 could buy precisely nothing in 2022. These are extreme cases. They are meant to be extreme, because they reveal, in accelerated form, what happens more gradually in stable economies. The direction is always the same, only the speed differs. Now we arrive at the forensic question: who benefits from this system? The answer is straightforward once you understand the mechanism. Those who benefit from inflation and financial repression are, first, governments with large debts. Inflation is a hidden tax that requires no legislation. It does not appear on a ballot. It does not trigger protests. It accomplishes through monetary policy what would be politically impossible through fiscal policy. Second, large borrowers. Anyone who owes fixed amounts of money in a depreciating currency wins. If you borrowed $100,000 for a house in 1970, and inflation ran at 7% per year through the 70s, your debt shrank in real terms while your house appreciated in nominal terms. You got rich by borrowing. The person who saved instead of borrowing got poor. Third, asset holders. Inflation drives capital into hard assets, real estate, equities, commodities. Those who already own these assets see their net worth rise. Those who don't own them find them increasingly unaffordable. This is why home ownership rates decline over long inflationary periods. This is why wealth inequality accelerates. This is why your grandparents could buy a house on a single income and you cannot. Fourth, the financial sector. Inflation and low real interest rates create a desperate search for yield. People cannot accept 1% returns when inflation is 3%, so they reach for risk. They hire financial advisors. They buy products. They pay fees. An entire industry exists to solve a problem that wouldn't exist if money held its value. The system is not broken. The system is working exactly as designed. It is transferring wealth from those who earn and save to those who own and borrow. And it is doing so continuously, invisibly, and relentlessly. Now let's name who pays. First, savers. Anyone who holds wealth in cash or fixed income instruments denominated in fiat currency is losing purchasing power constantly. This includes money in savings accounts, money market funds, certificates of deposit, and most bonds. Second, wage earners. Real wages in the United States peaked in 1973 when adjusted for inflation. A worker today earns nominally far more than a worker in 1973, but can afford less housing, less education, and less health care. Wages are sticky, prices are not. Inflation transfers value from labor to capital. Third, pensioners. Anyone living on a fixed income is being systematically impoverished. Social Security adjustments lag actual inflation. Private pension payouts are often fixed. The longer you live, the more you lose. Fourth, future generations. Inflation allows current consumption to be funded by debts that will be paid or inflated away by people who cannot vote to yet. This is intergenerational wealth transfer at a civilizational scale. Think about that structure. The people who control monetary policy benefit from inflation. The people who have no control over monetary policy pay for it, and the mechanism is so slow and diffuse that most people never connect their declining standard of living to its cause. This is where it breaks. Now we arrive at the core of the trap. Why can't this system be stopped? Why doesn't the government simply target zero inflation and let savings hold their value? The answer is mathematical. As of 2024, the United States federal debt stands at approximately $34 trillion. This represents 123% of GDP, higher than at the end of World War II. But here's the critical difference. After World War II, the debt was a one-time spike from wartime spending. It was incurred for a specific purpose that had ended. The underlying budget was close to balanced. Today, the debt is not a spike. It is structural. The United States runs a deficit every single year. The deficit is built into the system because entitlement spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, is legally mandated and growing faster than tax revenue. According to the Congressional Budget Office, interest payments on federal debt will exceed $1 trillion annually by 2025. That number will continue to grow. At some point, and we may already be past it, the debt becomes unpayable through conventional means. There are only three options. Option 1, massive tax increases. This is politically impossible. No governing coalition can survive doubling tax rates. The electorate would revolt. Option 2, massive spending cuts. This is also politically impossible. Cutting Social Security or Medicare is electoral suicide. No politician will campaign on it. Option 3, inflate the debt away. This is the only option that does not require explicit political action. The Federal Reserve can expand the money supply without a vote in Congress. Inflation can run its course without appearing on a ballot. That's the trap. The system cannot balance the budget. It cannot raise taxes enough. It cannot cut spending enough. It can only inflate. And inflation, by definition, destroys the purchasing power of savings. This is not a prediction. This is the constraint structure. Once you see it, you understand why savings cannot be preserved within the system as currently designed. Let's put numbers to this. If you saved $1,000 per month for 40 years starting in 1984, you would have deposited $480,000 by 2024. At a 1% savings rate, which was generous for most of the 2010s, you would have earned perhaps $100,000 in interest. Total nominal value, roughly $580,000. Now let's adjust for inflation. Using official CPI figures, which many economists argue undercount true inflation, that $580,000 has the purchasing power of approximately $220,1984. You saved for 4 decades. You accumulated nearly $600,000, and you ended up with less than half of what you put in real terms. This is with moderate inflation averaging around 3%. Now imagine what happens if inflation runs at 5 or 6% for an extended period, as it did in the 1970s, as it did in 2022. At 6% annual inflation, your money loses half its value in 12 years. A lifetime of savings becomes a decade of expenses, and you cannot outrun it by earning more because your wages lag inflation while your expenses lead it. This is the mathematics. This is why savers lose. This is why the system cannot protect you. Now we arrive at the question embedded in the title, what to do about it. And here, I must be careful. This is historical and educational analysis. It is not financial advice. I'm not qualified to tell you what to do with your money. I'm only qualified to show you what has happened historically when these conditions prevailed. What history shows is this. In every inflationary environment, wealth preservation required moving out of depreciating currency and into assets that maintained purchasing power. In Weimar Germany, those who held real estate, foreign currency, or commodities survived. Those who held paper marks were destroyed. In 1970s America, those who owned homes, stocks, or gold preserved their wealth. Those who held savings accounts lost half their purchasing power in a decade. In Argentina, those who held dollars survived. Those who held pesos did not. In Zimbabwe, those who left the country preserved their wealth. Those who stayed and held local currency became destitute. The pattern is consistent across centuries and continents. Hard assets outperform depreciating currency. Real estate, equities, commodities, productive land, and scarce goods hold value when money does not. But there are complications. Real estate can be seized or taxed. Equities can crash. Commodities are volatile. Gold generates no yield. Every asset has risks. And there is a deeper problem. These preservation strategies only work if you have surplus capital to deploy. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, as most people are, you cannot buy real estate or invest in equities. You are trapped in the depreciating currency by economic circumstance. This is the cruelest irony of the system. The people who can escape are those who already have wealth. The people who cannot escape are those who are trying to accumulate it. Financial repression does not fall evenly. It falls on those least able to avoid it. There are new variables that previous generations did not face. First, central bank digital currencies. Multiple governments are developing or piloting digital versions of their fiat currencies. These would allow direct control over the money supply at the individual level. Interest rates could be applied to individual accounts. Spending could be tracked. Currency could be programmed to expire or to be usable only for certain purchases. This is not speculation. The People's Bank of China has already piloted the digital yuan. The European Central Bank is developing the digital euro. The Federal Reserve has studied the digital dollar. If cash is eliminated and all transactions run through central bank digital currencies, the exit options narrow dramatically. Second, asset inflation. Over the past 2 decades, central bank policy has not just inflated consumer prices. It has inflated asset prices. Homes, stocks, and other assets have risen far faster than wages. This means that even if you try to escape to hard assets, the entry price is prohibitive. In 1980, the median home cost 3 times the median annual wage. Today, it costs 8 times. The latter has been pulled up. Third, debt incentivization. The system now actively punishes saving and rewards borrowing. If you borrow at 4% and inflation runs at 5%, you're being paid to borrow. If you save at 2% and inflation runs at 5%, you're being charged to save. The entire incentive structure pushes toward leverage and consumption. And when that leverage becomes unsustainable, as it did in 2008, the system bails out the borrowers while the savers watch their purchasing power erode to fund the bailout. These new variables do not change the fundamental dynamic. They intensify it. Here is why this matters right now. Global debt, public and private combined, stands at over $300 trillion. This is approximately 340% of global GDP. Interest rates, after being held near zero for over a decade, rose sharply in 2022 and 2023. The cost of servicing that debt has increased dramatically. Governments face a choice. Let rates stay high and watch debt service consume their budgets, or let inflation run and watch the real value of that debt shrink. History tells us which they will choose. Inflation targeting of 2% is not a ceiling, it's a floor. When debt becomes unsustainable, the floor becomes a launch pad, and the people who will pay are the same people who always pay. Those who saved in good faith, trusting that the units they accumulated would preserve their value. This is not about preparing for some distant catastrophe. The erosion is happening now. It has been happening your entire life. The only question is whether you see it. Let me draw the pattern together. Every fiat currency in history has eventually gone to zero. Every single one. The Roman denarius, the French assignat, the Weimar mark, the Zimbabwean dollar. The only currencies that survive are those backed by something the government cannot print. The pattern is always the same. A government accumulates debt. It cannot or will not repay that debt through taxation or spending cuts. It inflates the money supply. The currency loses value. Savers are destroyed. Asset holders are enriched, and the cycle resets, often violently. This pattern is not deterministic. There are ways to break it. Monetary reform, hard money standards, political transformation. But those breaks require political will that rarely materializes until after the damage is done. And by then, the wealth has already been transferred. The question is not whether your savings will be eroded. The mathematics guarantee they will be. The question is how much, how fast, and whether you understand the mechanism well enough to respond. Here's what I want you to take from this. The belief that saving money is a path to security is a relic of a world that no longer exists, if it ever did. In a world of fiat currency, inflation targeting, and structural deficits, saving money is not accumulating wealth. It is renting purchasing power that will be reclaimed by the system over time. This is not a conspiracy. It is an incentive structure. Governments benefit from inflation. Central banks benefit from inflation. Asset holders benefit from inflation. The financial industry benefits from inflation. The only people who do not benefit are those who hold depreciating currency and cannot exit. Understanding this does not mean panicking. It does not mean buying gold bars or moving to a bunker. It means seeing the system clearly. It means recognizing that the advice to save your money was not neutral. It was advice that served the system's need for deposits, for bond buyers, for patient capital that could be slowly drained. It means understanding that the question isn't whether your money will fail. Your money has been failing your entire life. The question is whether you'll notice before it's gone. This has been historical and educational analysis. It is not financial or investment advice. Past patterns do not guarantee future results. Every individual's circumstances are different. Consult qualified professionals before making financial decisions. The system is not a mystery. It is documented. It is studied. The people who designed it wrote papers explaining exactly what they were doing and why. Financial repression is policy. Inflation targeting is policy. Debt monetization is policy. And the cost of those policies is borne by those who trusted the system enough to save. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And if you listen carefully, you can hear the same verse playing that played in Rome, in Paris, in Berlin, in Harare. The question isn't if, it's when. And more importantly, will you see the pattern before it completes? This channel exists because patterns matter, because understanding how systems work and who they work for is the only way to stop being surprised when they work exactly as designed. If that matters to you, you know what to do.